Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispers of the Night. Tonight, I invite you into a story that feels both old and timeless. A story nestled between dusty shelves and the gentle hum of words. Left unspoken. Our tale is called The Book of Half-Spoken Words. Imagine, with me, if you will, a little bookshop on the edge of a quiet village. Its shelves lean with history, and its air carries the scent of parchment and pine. Within these walls lives Isla, a quiet soul who tends the books as her grandfather once did. She knows each volume by touch, by weight, by the way their pages sigh when opened. But one evening, as dusk paints the windows in shades of violet and gold, Isla discovers something extraordinary. A book bound in deep blue leather, unlike any other, its pages shimmering faintly, its sentences trailing off like unfinished thoughts. It hums, soft and alive, as if longing for voices to complete what was once left unsaid. Tonight, we'll follow Isla's journey with this magical book. Together, we'll listen to the whispers it gathers, explore the weight of silence, and learn the quiet beauty of words spoken aloud. So settle in, dear listener. Let the world outside fall away. You are safe here in this story where every word is a lullaby and every silence invites rest. Before we begin the unfolding of Isla's story, let us first prepare ourselves for rest. Close your eyes gently and allow your body to sink a little deeper into comfort. Take a slow breath in and then a soft breath out. Like the turning of a page, let each breath mark a gentle rhythm, guiding you closer to stillness. Notice the weight of your body supported fully where you rest. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, except here. The day behind you is complete, its words spoken. What remains is only this moment, quiet, simple, and yours. Imagine now that you are seated within Isla's bookshop. The shelves surround you, tall and lined with volumes that hold countless lives, countless voices. The air is rich with the scent of paper and wood, the faint sweetness of candle wax, and the subtle hush of a room that listens. A single candle flickers nearby, its flame steady but soft. It casts long shadows across the counter where the mysterious blue leather-bound book lies open. Its pages shimmer faintly as though alive, waiting. You can hear the faint hum of the book, a sound not unlike a lullaby, gentle, soothing, as if it already knows the language of dreams. Beside it, Quill, the little paper-winged spirit, hovers gracefully, his presence quiet and kind. His wings stir the air like the turning of pages, carrying with them a promise that all unspoken words will someday find their voice. Allow yourself to imagine the warmth of the shop wrapping around you like a blanket. Outside, the night sky stretches vast and serene, stars glimmering in scattered constellations. Their light drifts through the window, mingling with the glow of the candle, so that every corner of the room is touched by gentle radiance. With each breath, you feel lighter as though some of your own half-spoken words have been set down, released into the stillness. You need not hold them now. You need only rest in this quiet place where stories breathe and words wait to be found. You are safe. Here, the silence is not empty, it is full. Full of possibility, full of comfort, full of the promise that even the words you never spoke are understood. Let this peace settle into you like ink soaking gently into parchment. Let it linger in your chest, a quiet glow. You are ready now, ready to drift with Isla into the world of half-spoken words and discover what it means when silence is given a voice. The Book of Half-Spoken Words. The Bookshop at Dusk. The village was already folding itself into evening when Isla drew the shutters halfway down the shop windows. Dusk lingered in shades of rose and lavender outside, softening the crooked cobblestones that wound past her grandfather's bookshop. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke drifting from chimneys, and somewhere in the distance, a black bird called its last song of the day. Inside the shop, the light was gentler still. Amber lamps, with glass so old it glowed in uneven warmth, cast golden pools across shelves that seemed to lean toward each other like old friends. Dust danced lazily in their glow, stirred by Isla's quiet movements. She had worked here since she was little, first as a helper carrying piles of mismatched volumes, and now, nearly grown, as the one who kept the shelves in their delicate order. Her grandfather always said that books, like people, preferred companionship. A lonely book was an unhappy one, and so Isla took special care to arrange them in ways that made sense, not just to her, but she imagined to them. The poets gathered near the window, the philosophers on higher shelves, where their thoughts might stretch taller. The fairy tales tucked low so children could discover them without needing to ask this evening. However, there was a stillness that felt unusual. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, but the rhythm seemed louder than usual, as if keeping watch. Outside, the village sounds had quieted. The laughter of children chasing hoops had faded, and the last market sellers had rolled up their carts. Isla worked alone among the books, her grandfather resting upstairs after another long day. She brushed her fingers along the spines, their leather worn smooth from generations of readers. Many bore faded gold titles. Others were plain, their secrets hidden until opened. She reached for a stack of novels, leaning precariously, and as she adjusted them, something caught her eye. It was not a book she remembered seeing before. On the very end of a lower shelf, partly hidden behind a fallen atlas, lay a volume bound in deep blue leather. The shade was unusual, not the dark navy of seafaring logs, nor the pale cobalt of decorative covers, but a tone that shifted subtly in the lamplight, as though it carried shadows of the sky just after sunset. Isla slid it free carefully, and immediately a fine shiver of dust lifted into the air. The book was heavier than it looked. Its leather binding was smooth but worn, and when her fingers traced the edge of its cover, she felt the faintest vibration, like a hum too quiet for the ear, yet sensed beneath the skin. She glanced toward the stairs, half expecting her grandfather to come down and explain its presence. But the steps remained still, and the only sound was the slow turning of the clock's pendulum with cautious curiosity. Isla carried the book to the counter beneath the lamplight. She laid it down and, for a moment, simply looked at it. There was no title on the spine, no name pressed into the leather, only a faint, intricate embossing circles and half-formed shapes, almost like constellations scattered across the night sky. Her breath caught as she opened it. The first page was thick and creamy, faintly yellowed with age. Words marched across the surface, written in elegant, curling script, but halfway down they faltered. A sentence began with grace, then trailed off abruptly, as though the ink had dried mid-thought. Isla turned the page. Again lines of prose, complete for a moment, then unfinished, abandoned, as if the writer had been called away. Some pages shimmered faintly, as though the ink itself had been scattered with fragments of starlight. Others were barely legible, faded to near invisibility. She leaned closer, her heart beating faster. "What are you?" she whispered. The book seemed to respond. Very faintly so, faintly, she thought she might be imagining it. There was a sound. A soft hum, low and constant, like a chord waiting for its melody. It pulsed in rhythm with her own heartbeat. Isla brushed her fingertips over the unfinished lines. For a brief instant, she thought she felt warmth, as though the words had been waiting all this time to be touched, to be noticed again. She read one sentence aloud, her voice hushed in the lamplight. "The night remembers what the day forgets." And yet it stopped there. No continuation. The ink simply ended, like breath cut short. The moment her voice fell silent, the hum deepened, almost approvingly, as if the book acknowledged her attempt to give the unfinished thought life again. A small thrill traveled through her. "This is no ordinary book," she murmured. Isla glanced again toward the door and the shuttered windows. The bookshop was silent, but she felt less alone than before. She turned more pages, each the same. Beginnings without endings, paragraphs dissolving mid-sentence, questions never answered. Some were faded into nothing but pale outlines of words, as if they had once existed and then forgotten themselves. And yet the book didn't feel empty. It felt waiting. Isla thought of her grandfather, who had often told her stories about books that chose their readers. Some volumes, he would say, don't just tell a tale, they invite you to finish it. Her pulse quickened. Could this be one of those? She leaned back in her chair, listening to the hum beneath her fingertips. It wasn't threatening, nor was it mechanical. It reminded her of voices half heard through a wall, or the vibration of a violin string still quivering after a note had been played. The book was alive with incompletion. Outside, dusk thickened into night, and the lamps of the village glowed like fireflies against the dark. Isla had not lit the second lamp in the shop, but she didn't need to. The book's pages gave off the faintest shimmer, silver and blue, like moonlight reflected on water. Isla closed the cover gently, her palms lingering on the deep blue leather. She knew she should tuck it away again, perhaps bring it to her grandfather's attention in the morning. But she also knew she would not sleep tonight if she let it rest unanswered. The unfinished sentences stirred something inside her, a sense of possibility, of voices that had tried to speak but never completed their thought. She wondered, she read enough. Could she find where the stories were meant to go? Could she give them the words they lacked? The book seemed to hum more warmly beneath her hands, as though agreeing dot in that quiet, amber-lit shop at the edge of the village. Isla realized with certainty that she had discovered something rare, not just a forgotten volume hidden behind an atlas, but a book that wanted to be more than it was. And perhaps, she thought, her eyes bright in the glow of the lampit wanted her to help it remember. The murmurs of the pages, the night pressed close around the bookshop, folding the village into silence. Upstairs, her grandfather slept in his narrow bed, the steady rhythm of his snoring muffled by the floorboards. The shop itself had grown still, save for the occasional groan of timber settling in the cool night air. Yet Isla could not sleep. The blue-bound book sat on her desk, a quiet glow lingering at its edges, almost like it was breathing. She had carried it upstairs with her, unwilling to leave it in the darkened shop below. Now, by the flicker of her candle, she watched it, as though it might open itself if left unattended. Finally, with fingers trembling in anticipation, Isla drew the book toward her and opened it once more. At first, the pages were as they had been earlier in finished sentences, broken thoughts scattered across parchment like footprints leading nowhere. But as the candlelight deepened, she noticed something new, faint threads of silver ink unwinding between the words, like wisps of smoke curling into the night air. Then came the sound. At first, she thought it was the wind slipping through the shutters, soft and irregular. But no, the whispers rose from the pages themselves, so faint she had to lean close, straining her ears. Confessions, apologies, dreams. I should have told her before she left. If only I had been braver that night. One day I'll walk beyond these hills. One day. Isla's breath caught. She knew those voices, not the words themselves, but the tone, the rhythm. They belonged to people she had seen in her village. The baker's son who stared wistfully at travelers on the road. The widow who paused too long when walking past the churchyard. The grocer who never raised his voice but carried a quiet sorrow. In his eyes, these were words left unsaid. The realization stirred something inside Isla's chest. Her grandfather had always told her that books were full of secrets, but this was different. This was not written history. This was the heart itself, laid bare in fragments. The pages glimmered brighter, and the whispers grew clearer. She could almost feel them brushing her skin, like feathers passing over her arms. The book pulsed faintly beneath her hand, its hum deepening as though it recognized her listening. Then, from between the fluttering pages, something stirred. A sliver of paper peeled itself free, unfolding midair like a bird learning its wings. It shimmered silver in the candlelight, delicate yet alive. Its wings were thin as parchment, its body ink dark, and its eyes glowing pinpricks watched her with quiet intent. The creature hovered above the book, scattering tiny flecks of ink dust that drifted like fireflies. Isla gasped softly. "What are you?" The paper-winged being tilted its head, and when it spoke, its voice was both crisp and soft, like quills scratching across parchment. "I am Quill," it said, bowing ever so slightly in the air. "Keeper of words unfinished, guardian of the voices that never found breath." Its words, though whispered, filled the room with a kind of weight gentle but undeniable. "The book you hold," Quill continued, wings beating with a faint rustle like turning pages, "is not ordinary. It is a gathering place for half-spoken words. When hearts falter and tongues grow silent, when confessions are swallowed and dreams left to wither, their fragments drift here. The book remembers them, though their owners cannot." Isla swallowed, her eyes wide. "You mean these words belong to people I know?" Quill nodded, circling once above the open pages. "They belong to your village, yes. Each line, each unfinished thought is tethered to someone who left it unsaid. The baker who longs for elsewhere, the seamstress who wonders if she was ever truly loved, the child who whispered apologies only to the dark. The book holds them all, gently, until they are ready to be heard." Isla looked down at the glowing script, her fingers hovering above the unfinished words. "But why me? Why show me this?" The paper spirit settled on the edge of the book, folding its wings neatly, as if it had perched there many times before. "Because the book needs a voice. It hums for one who will listen, not merely read, but listen. Words unfinished are like seeds without soil. They ache for completion, for acknowledgement, for release. Few hear their murmurs, fewer still dare to answer." Isla's pulse quickened. "You want me to finish them?" Quill's eyes gleamed, twin sparks in the candlelight. "Not to invent their endings, child, but to give them air, to read them aloud, to let silence know they existed. A word unspoken is like a song unheard. It lingers, aching, until song lets it fly." The whispers rose again round her, soft and many, as if to prove Quill's words true. They drifted through her ears like distant echoes, tugging at her heart. Isla felt both wonder and a deep sadness. How many times had she herself held words on the tip of her tongue, only to swallow them? How many unfinished phrases lived inside her own chest? "I don't know if I can," she whispered. Quill spread its wings, scattering ink-like dust that shimmered briefly in the air. "You need only listen, the rest will follow." Isla touched the nearest line with trembling fingers. The words glowed faintly, alive under her touch. She read them aloud, voice unsteady. "I should have told you the truth before the river carried you away." But the sentence ended abruptly, yet the whisper that followed filled the silence, completing what had been left unsaid in the faintest, trembling tone. It was not her voice, but the echo of another's, bleeding through the book itself. The sorrow was sharp, yet tender, as though grateful to finally be heard. Tears pricked Isla's eyes. She closed the book gently, her hands trembling. Quill hovered once more, circling her candle flame without disturbing it. You see, it murmured, the book does not ask for answers. It asks for presence, for a witness, for kindness. Isla nodded slowly. Though her thoughts whirled, this discovery was greater than she could have imagined. A book that held the unsaid fragments of her village, a spirit bound to its pages, and whispers that tugged at the heart with every incomplete phrase. She realized then that the book was not only mysterious, it was deeply fragile. To hold, it was to carry the weight of voices left behind. As the candle burned lower, Quill drifted toward the window, wings shimmering faintly in the dark. Listen well, Isla, it said, for the words you hear may shape more than stories. They may shape the hearts of those who never dared to speak. The spirit dipped once, like a bow, before folding back into the book's spine. The glow faded, though the hum remained a soft, steady presence beneath her fingertips. Isla blew out the candle, the smoke curling upward like another unfinished phrase. She lay awake in the dim, her thoughts circling like moths. Somewhere beyond her window, the village slept. Its people dreamed, unaware that their unsaid words were alive in the quiet blue book resting by her side. And Isla knew, with a certainty that made her chest ache, that she had been chosen to listen. The weight of silence. Morning came slowly to the bookshop, filtering through the dusty windows in muted beams. When dawn painted the shelves in pale gold, she sat at her desk again, the deep blue book resting before her. Like a companion who refused to leave, its hum was softer now, almost like the purr of a cat, content in its waiting. Isla hesitated before opening it, her chest still heavy from the voices she had heard the night before, but curiosity pressed gently at her hands, urging her forward. The first page she touched brightened faintly. Silver script stirred across its surface like ripples across water. Isla leaned close, her lips trembling as she read the unfinished words aloud. I should have told you long ago, I'm proud of you. Her throat tightened. The ink faded abruptly, but the silence that followed was not empty, it was weighted, almost aching. Isla could feel the shape of the voice that had wanted to say it. A mother, perhaps. Someone whose love had never quite reached the surface of speech. She turned another page, her heart beating faster. I wish I had been brave enough to tell him that his laughter was my favorite sound. The words ended there, cut short, leaving the air thick with the sweetness of an unspoken friendship. Isla closed her eyes, and in her mind, she could almost hear the echo of the boy who had swallowed his confession, perhaps out of fear, perhaps out of shyness. Another page stirred beneath her hand, as though eager to be heard. She read carefully. If I had known it was the last time, I would have said goodbye. She thought of the old man who sat outside the inn each evening, staring at the road that led to the hills. Perhaps it was his voice that trembled in these lines, an absence he still carried. The book seemed heavier with each fragment, not in weight, but in presence. Each unsaid word pressed into her, filling her heart with both grief and longing. And yet, strangely, there was hope shimmering within them too. For even broken, these words lived on. Quill appeared without warning, fluttering softly from the pages in a whirl of parchment wings. It circled Isla's head, scattering flecks of ink that glimmered in the morning light. "You feel it now," the spirit said, its voice crisp as paper, yet tender. "They're so heavy." These words they heard. Quill landed lightly on the book's edge, folding its wings. Yes, they hurt because they were never spoken. Every heart holds unsaid words, but if too many are locked away, they weigh down the soul. A heart can grow quiet, the peaceful kind of quiet, but an emptiness, a silence that hollows. Isla traced the fading ink with her fingertip, and if no one listens, then the words fade forever. Quill whispered, its voice lowered, almost mournful. They vanish, leaving behind no trace but the ache of something missing. It is like losing a song before it was ever sung. The person who carried those words may never know what they lost, only that something inside them feels unfinished. She remembered the fragments she had read, the mother's unsaid pride, the boy's unspoken laughter, the old man's missing farewell. If these disappeared completely, would those people feel the loss without knowing why? She looked at Quill, her brow furrowing. But what can I do? I can't force people to say the words they've hidden. Quill's glowing eyes softened. No, you cannot force them. You can listen to their half-spoken words, carry them gently back into the world. Sometimes, a fragment spoken aloud is enough to stir a heart awake, enough to give someone courage to finish what they once left unsaid. The book hummed in agreement, its deep blue cover shimmering faintly in the morning light. Isla closed it carefully, her hands trembling. She sat back in her chair, staring at the quiet shelves that surrounded her. Books leaned peacefully against each other, but now she wondered how many half-spoken words hid behind the eyes of those who visited. The girl who asked for fairy tales, though she was nearly grown. The farmer who carried weathered maps but always sighed when he left. They all had unfinished thoughts, just like the pages of the book. I don't know if I'm strong enough, Isla admitted softly. Quill spread its wings, and the air stirred. With the rustle of invisible pages, strength is not required, only kindness. You need not fix every silence. You need only offer listening. Isla thought of her own life, then of the words she had swallowed, the feelings she had never voiced. She remembered the times she wanted to tell her grandfather how safe the bookshop made her feel, but instead had only smiled quietly. She remembered the times she wanted to ask her late grandmother what stories she might have left untold, but never found the courage. Her chest tightened with the realization she too carried half-spoken words. The book glowed faintly, as if in acknowledgement, as though reminding her she was not separate from the voices within. Isla drew in a slow breath, pressing her hand flat against the cover. Then I'll try. I'll listen. If these words fade without being heard, that's too sad to allow. Quill dipped its head in approval, the light of its eyes glimmering warmly. Then you are already doing what is needed. For every word carried into the open, another silence is lifted. One by one, a village learns to breathe again. The hum quieted, leaving Isla in the soft morning light of the shop. For a long moment, she sat in silence, listening not to the book now, but to the world beyond her window, to the footsteps of villagers stirring awake, the calls of merchants preparing their stalls, the chatter of children darting between streets. All around her, voices lived, yet she wondered how many of them hid words they could not say. The weight of silence pressed gently on her, no longer unbearable, but steady, a burden she was willing to carry, and Isla knew as she opened the shop door to the first golden beams of morning that her task had just begun. Gathering courage, the bookshop became a different place once Isla began to listen with new ears. It was not that the shelves had changed, or the light, or even the way the bell above the door chimed when customers entered. It was that Isla herself had shifted. She moved through her days with a new attentiveness, as though every voice carried the echo of unfinished sentences waiting to be heard by day. She kept the book carefully tucked in her satchel, close enough to feel its hum through the leather. Its presence was steady now, almost companionable, as though it trusted her with its weight. Whenever she brushed her hand over it, she felt warmth radiating, faint but comforting, like a hearth fire that never went out. And so, quietly, Isla began her work. The first morning, she noticed the miller at the market square, a stern man with lines of flour dusting his sleeves. He often spoke curtly to his daughter, a lively girl who skipped after him with wide, searching eyes. Isla remembered one of the book's fragments, the unspoken pride of a parent. She lingered at their stall, buying nothing, only smiling at the girl and then meeting the father's eyes with a gentle nod. "Your daughter," Isla said softly. "She seems clever with her hands. She was telling me how quickly she can braid rope." The miller blinked, surprised by the comment, then turned to his daughter. For a long moment, words seemed to balance on his tongue. At last, he reached out and patted her shoulder, voice rough, with unused tenderness. "She is clever," he admitted. Then, quieter, "I'm proud of you, little sparrow." The girl's face lit up, as if dawn had broken all over again that night. When Isla opened the book, the unfinished sentence about a mother's pride was glowing faintly, its letters filling themselves in with silvery ink until the thought was whole. The page pulsed warmly under her fingers, and Quill appeared, fluttering in joy. "You see," the paper spirit whispered, wings rustling like celebration. "Every truth spoken sets a word free." The days unfolded like this, one by one. A week later, Isla found herself beside the riverbank, where two boys skipped stones. Isla remembered the fragment about friendship never confessed. She sat on the grass near them, picking up her own stone. "You're lucky to have someone who makes you laugh like that," she said gently, tossing the stone into the current. "Not everyone finds a friend who feels like sunlight." The quiet boy flushed, glancing nervously at his companion. His lips parted, and at last he murmured, Your laughter's my favorite sound." The other boy stared, wide-eyed, before grinning in delight. "Then I'll keep laughing just for you." When Isla returned to the book that evening, the words about unspoken friendship flared with light, their completion flowing into place. Quill circled her head, scattering flecks of ink light like sparks of joy. Brave hearts bloom when given the smallest nudge, it told her another day. In the cobbled alley behind the blacksmith's forge, Isla paused to watch the apprentice carry heavy buckets of water. He was shy, often keeping his gaze lowered, though Isla had seen the way his eyes lingered on the baker's daughter, who brought bread to the forge each morning. As the apprentice passed, Isla offered him a kind smile. "You know," she said softly, "bread cools quickly if no one tells the baker it was good." The boy nearly dropped his bucket. His face flushed crimson, but the next day, Isla caught him slipping a note into the baker's daughter's basket. 3 words scrawled awkwardly, but true. "I admire you." And again, the book glowed. Each time a villager spoke what they had once hidden, Isla felt the hum in the book grow stronger. Its pages no longer shimmered faintly. They pulsed with warmth, as though each completed phrase added another ember to a fire within. When she opened it now, sentences that had been broken stood whole and steady, glowing like constellations finally aligned. Quill was radiant with delight. Its paper wings gleamed silver in the lamplight, scattering flecks of brightness that clung to the shelves like tiny stars. "The book is mending," it told her, voice brimming with joy. "Every voice freed completes what was once only fragment, and so the book grows lighter, and hearts grow stronger." Isla's own heart swelled as she watched. The villagers began to change in small, tender ways. The miller's daughter skipped more brightly, her laughter louder in the square. The quiet boy at the river walked with his friend shoulder to shoulder, their laughter echoing together. The shy apprentice carried his buckets with a new spark in his eyes, and though they did not know why, the village itself seemed warmer, as though invisible knots were loosening, one by one. Isla found herself smiling, more easily offering gentle words, where before she might have stayed silent. She realized that courage was not always grand or loud. Sometimes it was a whisper, spoken at the right moment. A note slipped into a basket, a smile that told someone they mattered each evening. When the shutters were drawn and the shop lay quiet, Isla would open the blue book by candlelight. She traced the glowing lines, marveling at how sentences once broken now stood whole. Some even carried tiny flourishes at the end, as if relieved to finally rest complete. One night, as she lingered over a page now whole, Quill perched at the edge of the book, eyes gleaming. "You carry their voices with care," it said softly. "Do you see how they shine when given space to breathe?" Isla nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "I do. And I think I'm beginning to shine a little too." The spirit tilted its head in approval. That is the secret of half-spoken words. In helping others release them, you begin to free your own. Isla touched the cover of the book, feeling its warmth pulse against her palm. It no longer felt like a burden, but a companion, a living heart she had been entrusted to tend. And as she closed it for the night, the village resting in dreams beyond her window, she felt something stir within herself, a courage, gentle but steady, like a candle flame that could not be blown out. The book was mending, the villagers were speaking, and quiet Isla of the dusklit bookshop was gathering courage of her own. The night of unfinished stories. The book had never felt so heavy, not in the way of dust or age, nor in the way of tomes thick with endless histories. This weight was dipped alive, deliberate, and meant for her. Isla had been shelving a small stack of poetry anthologies by candlelight, the village long since asleep, when the book slipped down from its usual corner and landed on the counter with a low, resonant thud. She startled, nearly dropping the delicate volume in her hands. Its cover gleamed more brilliantly than she had ever seen, the deep blue leather flickering like midnight waves beneath moonlight. She reached for it, fingers trembling, and as soon as she touched the spine, the book sprang open as though it had been waiting for her. The pages fluttered wildly, riffling past confessions and longings, apologies and unspoken kindnesses she had already helped mend. They stopped abruptly near the middle, and on the left-hand page, a faint shimmer glowed. She leaned closer, eyes narrowing. Then her breath caught. Her name was there, written in a hand she recognized. The same curling script the book always used, but surrounded by sentences half-formed, words trailing like broken bridges. I wish I had told grandfather, if only. They knew how lonely I sometimes feel when I stand with my friends. I want to say there's something in my heart I've never dared to share. The words trailed into silence. Unfinished, aching. Her chest tightened. She closed the book quickly, almost in defiance, as if hiding it would undo what she had just seen. But the low hum of the binding pulsed against her palms, steady and insistent, reminding her that she could not ignore it. A soft flutter of paper wings stirred the quiet air. Quill, the spirit who had become her guide, emerged from between the shelves. His form shimmered like parchment caught in lamplight, his eyes bright with both gentleness and knowing. "You've seen it, Isla," he said softly. His voice carried the sound of a turning page, delicate yet unshakably swallowed hard. "Why my name? Why me?" I thought the book only held the villagers' half-spoken words. Quill tilted his head, his wings rustling faintly. The book does not choose who is worthy or unworthy. It gathers from every heart, yours included. You've spent these weeks listening to the silences of others, helping them speak aloud. Did you think yourself immune to silence's shadow? Isla lowered her gaze. She thought of her grandfather, whose bookshop smelled of pine wood and old ink. He had raised her quietly, with love tucked into small gestures, the extra blanket folded neatly at the foot of her bed, the mug of warm milk waiting after long days. She had never told him enough how deeply she admired him, how much his quiet kindness had shaped her. She had thought it, yes, but thoughts were not the same as words spoken into another's waiting heart. And then there were her friends in the village, the children she had grown up alongside. she often held back, afraid of saying too much, of revealing the loneliness that sometimes followed her like a shadow at dusk. She hid behind smiles, offered nods, and let laughter fill the space where truer words might have lived. "I didn't realize," she whispered. Quill landed softly on the counter beside the open book. His feathered form glowed faintly, illuminating the shimmering half-phrases written across the page. Many do not realize until it is too late. We silence ourselves not only to protect others, but often to protect our own hearts from rejection, from vulnerability. Yet silence carries its own cost. Isla brushed her fingers lightly over the words. They trembled beneath her touch, fading at the edges as though her silence threatened to erase them completely. "What happens?" she asked, her throat tight, "if I never speak them?" Quill's wings drooped slightly, the glow of his form dimming. Then they vanish, not from memory, perhaps, but from possibility. They leave behind an emptiness you may not notice until it has settled in too deeply. And others, your grandfather, your friends, may never know the truth that was waiting in you. The thought pierced her. She imagined her grandfather never hearing her gratitude, never knowing how dearly she treasured their evenings by the fire. She imagined her friends never realizing how much she needed them, how often their kindness had been her anchor. Her eyes burned. She pressed the heel of her palm against them, willing the tears away. "I don't know if I can," she admitted. "What if I speak and the words come out wrong? What if no one wants to hear them?" Quill hopped closer, his gaze warm and unwavering. Words need not be perfect to matter. Even trembling voices carry truth, and truth, once spoken, has a way of finding where it belongs. Isla let the silence stretch. Outside, the wind pressed gently against the bookshop's windows, rattling them with a sound like a distant sigh. She closed her eyes and drew a deep breath, steadying herself as she had so often encouraged the villagers to do. "Show me where to begin," she whispered. The book stirred, its pages glowing faintly. A line of golden light stretched across the unfinished words, waiting. Quill nodded. "Speak first to yourself. Acknowledge what you have hidden." Her lips trembled, but she parted them. The words came haltingly, fragile as fledgling wings. "I wish I had told grandfather how proud I am of him, how proud I am to be his granddaughter, how safe he made me feel when the world seemed too loud." Her voice wavered, but the words hung in the air, fragile and true. On the page, the incomplete sentence shone and blossomed into golden script. Whole at last, she drew another breath, pressing her hand to her chest. "I wish my friends knew that sometimes I feel lonely even when I smile, that their laughter and kindness mean more than I ever let on." The glow deepened, the letters curling into brilliance. The warmth of the book spread into her fingertips, then her arms, as though her honesty fed its quiet flame. And then, the hardest words of all. "There is something in my heart, feelings I've hidden, Beckos. I was afraid, but they are real, and they matter." She did not name those feelings aloud, not yet, but even acknowledging them loosened a knot inside her chest that had been tightening for years. The golden script brightened into a radiant glow, flooding the shop with soft light. Isla shielded her eyes, yet tears spilled freely, now not of fear, but of release. Quill's wings shimmered, brighter than she had ever seen. You see, even trembling words can carry light. You have begun, Isla, and beginnings are enough. The book pulsed gently, as though it sighed with relief. Its weight grew lighter in her hands, no longer a burden, but a companion. She looked at Quill through blurred vision. Do you think if I keep speaking, keep sharing, that it will matter? Quill nodded slowly, his gaze tender. Words unspoken. Wither, words spoken take root. You have planted the first seeds. Let them grow. Isla closed the book carefully, cradling it against her chest. For the first time since she had discovered it, she felt not only responsibility but kinship. The book did not belong only to others. It belonged to her as well as a mirror of her own heart. That night, she climbed the narrow stairs to her room beneath the eaves. She sat on the small cot, book still in her lap, listening to the creaks of the old shop and the steady rhythm of her own breath. The silence, no longer pressed on hurt, seemed to wait, patient, ready for her to continue. When she drifted into sleep, the last thought she carried was not fear of unfinished words, but hope for those still waiting to be spoken. The living book. The transformation came quietly, as all important things often do. It was late evening in the bookshop, the windows awash in the last lavender shades of dusk. Shadows stretched long across the wooden floorboards, and the familiar scent of ink, dust, and pine filled the room. Isla moved slowly through the aisles, her hands brushing the shelves she had known since childhood. Every book seemed to glow faintly in the fading light, as if the shelves themselves were sighing in contentment. And there, on the counter where it had chosen to rest, lay the blue leather-bound book. Only it no longer looked quite the same. The cover shimmered as though alive, its surface pulsing gently, like the rise and fall of breathing. The once faded lettering on the spine now gleamed in delicate gold, every curl and line vivid as if etched by starlight. Isla approached with reverence, setting aside the ledger she had been writing in. She reached out, and the moment her fingers touched the cover, a warmth spread into her skin. The book was warm alive. Quill fluttered down from the rafters, his paper-thin wings scattering faint motes of light in his wake. He landed gracefully on the counter, his bright parchment eyes fixed on the book. "It is ready," he said softly. His voice carried the gravity of a truth long known, now unveiled. Isla's throat tightened. Ready for what? Quill's gaze never left the shimmering cover. It has completed its first cycle, with every confession spoken, with every truth brought into light. The book has grown fuller, richer. It no longer holds only half-spoken words. It now holds living ones, complete stories that hum with the power of honesty. It is no longer just a collector of silence. It is a keeper of voices. Isla pressed her hand gently to the cover. A soft vibration thrummed against her palm, steady and calming, like a heartbeat. The pages stirred faintly of their own accord, flipping just enough to reveal completed entries. A father's love spoken at last, a friendship rekindled by truth, a quiet girl's whispered gratitude to her grandfather. Each line shone with a golden glow, no longer fragile fragments, but whole sentences carrying warmth and permanence. Her eyes filled with wonder. So the book, it remembers them, all the words. Quill nodded, wings rustling like soft paper. It remembers, and it will continue to remember. Every time a word is spoken that once lived only in silence, the book will hold it, so that it is never lost to the emptiness. It is not just a recorded, is a living proof that courage leaves echoes. Isla traced one glowing sentence with her fingertip. The letters shifted subtly beneath her touch, as though responding, as though alive. She shivered, not in fear, but in awe. And what of the words, still unspoken? She asked. Quill turned to her, then, his expression thoughtful. The book will always remain. It will listen. It will hum. It will catch the fragments people cannot yet bring themselves to finish. And it will wait patient as the stars for the moment they find their courage. Not all words are ready to be spoken at once. Some must ripen with time, like fruit on a tree. Isla closed her eyes, breathing deeply. She thought of the villagers she had spoken with, the father who had finally told his daughter he loved her, the shy apprentice who had dared to speak admiration, the friend who had admitted regret. She thought of her own trembling words spoken aloud for the first time, and how light had filled her chest when she did. Each truth, small or large, had mattered. Each had changed something. She opened her eyes again, her gaze settling on the book. Then it will always be here, for us. Quill's paper-feathered wings gleamed. Yes, as long as there are words unspoken, the book will wait. It is not an ending, Isla. It is a beginning that never ends. The room fell into a deep, comfortable stillness. The lamplight flickered softly across the shelves, and for the first time since she had discovered the strange blue book, Isla felt no weight. In her chest-only peace, that night, as she closed the shop, she did so with a heart unburdened. She latched the old wooden door, drew the curtains against the cool night air, and turned down the lamps one by one. The shop seemed to exhale, settling into its own quiet slumber. On the counter, the living book glowed faintly in the dark, steady beacon. She paused at the doorway, hand on the key, and looked back once more. The glow of the book felt like the soft pulse of a companion, a reminder that words unspoken could always find their way, if only given time. That night, she dreamt not of unfinished sentences, but of conversations yet to come, futures where villagers spoke freely, where no word was left to wither in silence. The days that followed carried a new rhythm. By day, Isla continued her gentle work in the shop, stacking volumes, guiding readers to forgotten treasures, mending broken bindings, and always she listened to the laughter outside, to the sighs of customers browsing the shelves, to the quiet pauses in conversations where unsaid words waited, trembling. She learned to recognize them, the little silences heavy with meaning. Sometimes she nudged, sometimes she waited, but always she carried in her heart the knowledge that words mattered most when they crossed the fragile space between people. Each evening, when she closed the shop, she would rest her hand on the book's cover. Sometimes she whispered a word of gratitude. Sometimes she spoke aloud, a truth she had kept to herself that day, however small. Each time, the book hummed softly in reply, as though acknowledging, as though keeping her company. And each time, Quill was there, sometimes perching on her shoulder, sometimes gliding silently among the rafters. He grew brighter with each truth spoken, his form stronger, his wings luminous. You see, he told her one evening, his voice warm. The more words spoken from the heart, the less shadow silence can cast. You are helping more than you know. Isla smiled softly at him. I think the book is helping me as much as I'm helping it. Quill's parchment eyes glowed kindly. That is how all true stories work. One night, weeks later, she stood beneath the star-scattered sky outside the shop. The village was hushed, windows glowing faintly with warm light, the scent of hearth smoke curling into the air. She tilted her head back, gazing at the vast velvet dome above her. The stars glittered like unwritten words, waiting to be spoken into constellations. She felt the book's warmth at her side, tucked beneath her arm. Its hum was steady, reassuring, like a heartbeat that matched her own. With a breath as deep as the night itself, she whispered to the stars. Her voice carried on the cool air, no word left unsaid. The stars shimmered as if they had heard, and from the book at her side came a soft, contented hum in agreement. Isla closed her eyes, letting the sound settle into her. For the first time, she felt not just the keeper of a magical book, but the keeper of her own heartland, the promise that words, once spoken, could light the darkness. And so, the story ended, not with silence, but with a vow written not in ink, but in breath and voice, whispered to the stars, and held forever in the living book that glowed softly at her side. And so, dear dreamer, our story closes. The book glows now with voices completed, truths spoken, and hearts lighter for it. Isla has learned what perhaps we all know deep down, that words carry power. Not only when written, but when spoken gently from the heart as you drift into sleep. May you too find peace in knowing your words, your feelings, your quiet truths all have meaning. And under tonight's stars, the book hums softly in agreement. Good night, dear listener. Sweet dreams.